This session, as we were told earlier this morning, is recorded for future viewing. And if you have a question or comment, you can use a meeting chat, which is the thought bubble. It's either at the top or the bottom of your screen to ask questions or leave comments. Please do not share your screen or stop the recording. If you happen to log off, just click back on to Microsoft Teams meeting link again to rejoin. Lori, would you like to add anything before I introduce Kaʻiulani?
No, enjoy Kaʻiulani's presentation. Hope the day is going well so far.
Thanks, Lori. So Kaʻiulani Kauihou is the founder of Hiʻohia, a Hawaiian culture and language resource nonprofit organization that she started in 2011. She is the lead curriculum developer for Hiamana. It's a financial education and educational and entrepreneurship company with a cultural base. And the work they do is really widespread throughout Kapai Aina. She has 17 years of experience as an educator and curriculum developer, and she graduated from UH Manoa with both her master's and bachelor's degrees. And she's also a land researcher, genealogist, surf mom, and world traveler. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Kaʻiulani. Thank you so much for being here.
Aloha and mahalo, Sydney and Laurie. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to share some of the projects that we've been working on. I'll go ahead and share the screen with you, and I'll start this presentation. Of course, if anyone has questions, please just go ahead, let the moderators know. I'm not sure how they're receiving questions, but either send a chat to Laurie and Sydney, raise your hand, or whatever the protocol is for questions, and I have no problem with you jumping in at any time. I'm the kind of person that will forget a question if I don't ask it right away, so I sympathize with all of you. So aloha mai tako, my name is Kaʻiulani Kauihou, and I'm a researcher, curriculum developer, publisher, and a surf mom, like Sydney said. So this is my why, my family. We are from Kaha, Oahu. I've lived here most of my life. I have a great love for the Waianae Coast and its people. I did go to Kamehameha schools, and that's where my love for Olelo Hawaii, for Hawaiian language started. From 7th grade, I took Hawaiian language there for 6 years. And then I went on to continue my Olelo at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I did another 6 years of Hawaiian language there. I did earn my bachelor's degree in Hawaiian language and my master's in education and teaching, because it was always my dream to be a kumu kaya puni, which I accomplished that, and I started my student teaching at Pu'ohala, Kula Kaya Puni o Pu'ohala, and then I was an emergency hire out at Kula Kaya Puni o Nanakuli, and later I also taught at Kula Kaya Puni o Hau'ula, so that was fun, and I continued to do other Olelo Hawaii jobs, different translations and projects for companies. But some of the other schools I worked at were Brigham Young University, teaching Olelo at college level. And so, like Sydney said, I founded a nonprofit called Hiʻohia, and our main focus is developing Hawaiian resources for our community. When I started at Pu'ohala, just a little bit of background of how this whole project that I'm going to be sharing came to be. It was during the time when Hawaiian language resources were very scarce. And so what was happening was that there were English books that were being ordered for our kula, and we would opia tuko, which most of you know is cut and glue. So we translate these English stories into Hawaiian, cut them out, print it out, cut it out, and glue the Hawaiian translations over the English words in the book. And so I was like, that's a great solution. That's a real quick, like we can have some resources right now kind of solution. And so as I was teaching, I came across this book that you can see on screen, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. And it did something to me. When I read the book in Hawaiian, it just had this really different feel than the way I remembered reading it as a child. Like, I used to love it as a child. I loved that the tree, loved the little boy so much. But reading it in Hawaiian, I realized that so much of our Hawaiian perspective and value was missing. And so then I was reading it like this boy just came and he took, all the fruit and he took all the branches and then he took the tree trunk and then he just sat on the tree and then the end. And I felt so like that was not pono at all. And so I realized that there was definitely a component missing when we were doing these translations over these English books. And so what was the solution? And so as you can see on the right, we have a copy of an old Hawaiian language newspaper page. And I knew from my time in college that the Hawaiian language newspapers was this huge, just waipuna of real Hawaiian ike and knowledge with a Hawaiian perspective on things, where if a Hawaiian had wrote The Giving Tree, there would have been some protocol and some pule first. And, there would have been some pono practices in utilizing resources. And it wouldn't be about capital or personal gain, but it would also be about malama aina and malama kekahi kekahi. And so it would have been a very, very different book, I feel, if our Kūpuna had written it. And so because of this, I wanted to kind of go down that rabbit hole and do some research and see what mo'olelo can we pull out of these out of these Hawaiian language newspapers of the late 1890s, early 1920s, and start creating resources from this kind of more authentic Hawaiian voice. So many questions. I knew I had the idea, but I had no vehicle to move it forward, to make it happen. And so a little bit later, after I had left school, after I had graduated from the university, I began working for a nonprofit, Kaʻala Farms, and they have received some funding through a grant to purchase Hawaiian books for a school program that I was working in. And I went and I looked everywhere for real, authentic Hawaiian resource books. And what I found was kind of limited at the time. I want to say it was books like Hina, the Happy Dolphin of Oahu. and it was not one of our stories, and it kind of didn't really portray our Hawaiian values. And there were a lot of these types of books that had Hawaiian words, Hawaiian places kind of thrown in, maybe some Hawaiian characters, but overall. So after trying to figure out what we can do, we came up with the idea of, hey, why don't we, instead of using all this money from Kaʻala Farm, purchase these books that we don't, we don't feel is right for what we're trying to accomplish. And so instead we decided to set up a nonprofit organization and create the resources that we needed ourselves. So I'm not an illustrator, and I'm also not a photographer. I'm not a lot of things except someone who has these big ideas and wants to kind of move forward, making projects happen. So I had, like I said, a big idea. I had no money, but I had a very, very supportive community who did want to see these books happen. So I said, okay, we have mo'olelo. So the first step was to find the mo'olelo in the newspaper. So find the stories that we needed in these Hawaiian language newspapers. Once we had accumulated I think we found about 20 stories, we formed a Kūpuna council from our moku. So we wanted to focus just on the Waianae moku. So we were looking just at mo'olelo or legends in the Waianae moku on Oahu. And so we found a Kūpuna council, or I guess an expert panel of grandparent level community members. And we had them go through the stories and actually kind of advise us on which stories we should tell. So there were lots of stories on Maui and Kamapua'a that we felt the children were a little bit more familiar with in the area. And so the Kūpuna Council actually decided to choose stories that were a little less known. And so once we did that, because we're not illustrators, we needed models. We wanted to reenact these stories, and we wanted to reenact them on location of where it was happening. We said, all right, this is the Waianae Coast. We want to get the people of this community whose story, who are kind of, I don't want to say the owner of the stories, but whose stories these belong to. And we want to have them be the ones to kind of take the kuleana and be responsible for the retelling, the reenacting, for every part of making, of materializing these resources. And so what we did was we found Hawaiian models, over 100 Hawaiian models to reenact 8 mo'olelo that were chosen by our Kūpuna Council. We did the research of where these stories happen traditionally, and we worked with different partners to reenact these stories for photos for our books on location. So one of our stories on the Waianae Coast was Kaʻiulani and Hiʻohia, and in that story, they're on the top of Ka'ala Mountain. So we had to work with DLNR to get access to drive to the top of Ka'ala Mountain with all of our props and everything. And, we had to go through a lot of protocols about not bringing in invasive species on our feet, because there's some protected areas and natural resources that they don't want disturbed. But we were able to go and work with these partners. We've had to work with Border Water Supply to get deep into the valleys and do certain shoots. But we tried as hard and as much as we could to make it authentic. And so with these partners, we also needed makeup artists for some of our more interesting characters, and we needed Hawaiian seamstresses. We needed Hawaiian kapa makers and tool makers and fishermen to catch some fish for us and also teach us how to hold the nets and how to throw. And we had to partner with some of these Hawaiian canoe clubs out here so we could use their canoes for different photo shoots. And so it was really the whole community coming together to make this possible. And what was amazing was, like I said in the last slide, is it was a big idea and we had zero money. So no one got paid for any of their aloha, for any of the kokua they gave. They just gave it because they knew that it definitely was a need in our community, and it was a way to showcase the positive things and the talents that were coming out of this district on Oahu. So in the end, with our, we had no money, but we were able to create all the files for the books. And once we had created the files for the books, we kind of put it out there and we looked for an angel investor, and someone came in and said, I'll invest in this, and when you publish books, you can pay me back from sales. And so that was really a blessing for us because we jumped into it, we got all this help and all the support, and we didn't know how anything was going to get published, but it did. So we're so grateful that happened, and we were able to sell, I think 1/3 of our whole inventory was bought up by Kamehameha right away. So that was that was great because I didn't like living with boxes of books for very long. But we had great orders. The Kūpuna program for the DOE bought for every school. The Hawaii State Library bought for every library in the state. And we were really getting these books out to the keiki and the people that we really created it for. So this is our first set of 8 books. And move it up to 2020 real quick. This is the same 8 books, but we were able to have them all translated into Olelo Hawaii. So we're super excited to offer the English and the Hawaiian version. So after we finished this project, we had formed our nonprofit organization. We went forward and wrote for a grant, and we won one with the Atherton Family Foundation. So mahalo nui to them that we were able to get that grant. And so for our second district, we chose to do the moku of Ho'olauloa. And so these are some of the characters from this second series. But after we completed the Wai'anae series, we had a blueprint for how we could replicate this in other moku. And so when we went to the Ko'olauloa district for this second series, as you can see, we kind of had it down. And so in the end, what we needed were 135 Hawaiian models, 8 Hawaiian photographers, because we did another series of 8 puke, 4 Hawaiian seamstresses, 2 Hawaiian makeup artists, 6 Hawaiian editors, 1 Hawaiian graphic designer, 2 Hawaiian project directors, and 6 Hawaiian board of directors. And with this team, we were able to go forth and work on our second series. And so I'm just gonna show you some of the ones that we did from this series. And it's new, it was just published this past November. We started doing sales. And so newly released English and Hawaiian. So we've done this Laie Ikolai, Kamapua'a, and it's a little different. It was a little different from the first series because for this series, we had an amazing Hawaiian graphic artist who was able to Photoshop whales off of Laie Point jumping out of the water and lots of other fun things. So, you know, we have Mo'olelo, Kane, and Kanaloa coming up and down the coast. Hiʻohia also traveled down the coast on her way to Kauai. We had Maui, bringing the floating island of Kuhuku and connecting it to Oahu. Some of you don't know the Mo'olelo. And so it was just a really, really fun project. And it was amazing to have these Hawaiians come out in both districts. So in both districts, probably the more difficult part is getting our Hawaiian kane, our Hawaiian males, to hamo their surf shorts and put on a malo. We had to teach, I think, 95% of all the boys and men to the project. Favorite quote. This is my favorite quote from the project. Soli Alpalava. Second from the right, he said, "This is the first time I actually felt like I was a Hawaiian." And you know, some on the Ko'olauloa coast, they have such strong Samoan pride and strong Tongan pride, strong every kind of pride. But sometimes for the Hawaiians, it's like they're still trying to find where they can fit in, where they can practice. And we have some amazing community members out there, like Auntie Kella, Uncle Side Bridges, Lono Logan, that are really creating these spaces for more and more Hawaiians to come and participate. But having these boys put on these models, very uncomfortable. They all begged me to Photoshop their thighs because they all have surf shorts tan. But, you know, I think they look great. They did wonderful. But really having them, you know, come and go through and reenact these battles. And this was part of the battle of Olopana and Kamapua'a and Kaliwa'a, and having them learn the stories, and even having some of the younger children ask, you know, did you write this story? And I'm like, no, I did not write it. Your Kūpuna wrote this story, and it's for you, and it exists in the new Pepa. And so the whole purpose was to bring it out of the new Pepa and share it with our keiki and with our families, and to give pride to the people in these communities, and to give pride to who we are as Hawaiians, and also to just help populate our classrooms with these resources that are not from me. They're from our Kūpuna. And so all of the books that were translated or edited from the Hawaiian language newspapers have an image of the newspaper, that article that it was from, in the back of the book. So people can see exactly when it was printed, you know, and they can go back into that, into Ulupau and they can find the original document and do more research. And that is really one of my goals, is to help them to reconnect to that source, to that kumole, and to learn even more. Oh, okay, so go back to the next slide. Before we jump into this last series, did anyone have any questions about the Ko'olauloa or the Waiʻanae series?
There were a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay, so where do they get copies? And are they sold individually or the entire series?
Currently, we are selling them as a series. At the end of the slides, I will have a link to, I'll have all the links, our website and our store site and everything, to where you can purchase copies. The schools will have a different link. The DOE schools have a different link than everyone else because they do purchase orders, but I will share that. And we are looking to put the books up into Amazon, and I think we will have singles available at that time. But right now, it's mostly, we're just selling them in sets.
Thank you. I think one other question, if I'm not mistaken, is while they're asking about like other areas, would your team be willing to, if funded, do other areas? Ko'olaupoko, Waianae, but I think that's all the questions.
Hey, mahalo, yeah. We would love to do every single moku on the whole in the whole state. So basically, we are open and always looking at which moku. So we don't go, our protocol is that we don't go into a moku and say, we want to tell your stories. We need the moku to invite us in and say, can you help us tell our stories? And so we have been invited now by Ko'olaupoko and a couple moku on the outer islands, Maui and Big Island so far. And so the second part is really about funding. So we are writing grants continually. So if your moku has a grant that's specifically for that district and you want to partner with us to write for your district, we can do that. As long as, we just, funding is always helpful. Waianae was a really special case where we brought everything together for free. But if you have all the resources and everyone is willing to do the same and kind of donate everything, we can also work around that as well. So yeah, mahalo nui. Okay, so I'll continue on. And so this is our last project, which was not a moku specific project, but I did realize that there was a need for a step up program. I want to call it program. It's not a program. Kind of just a step up, rung in the ladder for our Olelo Hawaii learners to kind of, have a little more sturdy path into reading the Nupepa. So if any of you have ever gone to Ulukau and tried to read those Nupepa, there are no okina, there are no kahako. The language wasn't standardized. I'm just going to use that word standardized, in that there are still a lot of English letters. Let's say like December is still like deke mapa, instead of now we say in the schools keke mapa. And so as a new language learner, going into those Nupepa can be very intimidating. You almost feel like, I started when I was in college, which means I was reading Hawaiian language. I was learning Hawaiian language for 6 years in intermediate and high school. And when I went to college and I started reading the Nupepa, I felt like I hadn't learned anything almost. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was reading. I didn't know what anyone was talking about. And it was very, very intimidating for me. And so because of that, I wanted to pull out these themed articles from the Nupepa to really help Haumana kind of get familiar with the style of writing. And I had originally made these books with no okina and kahako, but we were commissioned by Department of Hawaiian Education to make them, but include Okina and Kahako. So we did this version just for them. And in this series, we also have 8. So just to kind of show you some different ones, we have Naholoholo Naholo I Europa me America, and this is the animals that basically traverse Europe and America. So all the articles that we found about animals in Europe and or America, and they're pretty similar, those two, like buffalo, deer, and just different kinds of animals. And then we also did the same on the right with Africa and Asia animals. And this is an example of one of the articles. You can see at the end of the article, it says, Kealaula Aukake 1, 1866. So this is from the Kealaula newspaper of August 1st in the year 1866. So every single book, every article that we put in does include, the newspaper and the date that it was from, if anybody wants to go back and reference. But as you can see, if you've ever seen the newspaper, it's just all black and white, usually very small font, long columns. And so we tried to break it up a little more. We did add in Okina and Kahako. We tried to leave the words as much as possible exactly as they were in the Nupepa. So you'll see some S's, some R's in there, different letters that they were using at the time before they all got cut out. Okay, and this was a really fun project too, because when I was pulling out the articles, I didn't always know what they were talking about myself. So I spent some hours, and this is one example, the BP Kuapu'u. I did not know what that was. And BP Kuapu'u, I couldn't find it in Behe or the Hawaiian dictionary. And so I had to literally take each line of this article apart and use all the descriptions, like how big it is, what it looks like, where in the world it lives, and it lives, way up in the mountains, and this is its behavior, and this was what it was used for. And at the end, I finally, after all of that research and conclusion, I learned that it was a musk ox, which, we're not really familiar with musk ox here in Hawaii. And so it was really a learning experience for me as well, because I had to figure out what a lot of these animals were. And another example, which I don't have a picture of here, there was an animal called a puaka. And for the life of me, I could not figure out what a puaka was. And it was not in the dictionary. A lot of the words in the newspaper are not in the dictionary. And it said it was like a half a zebra and half a horse. And it had I think the back half of it looked like a zebra, and the front half of it looked like a horse. And it lived in Africa, and this and this and this. And so, I don't know any animal that was half of a zebra. So I had to do a lot of research, and I found out it actually went extinct before the 1900s. But there was a Hawaiian who had traveled and who saw it at a zoo in New York, and it was the last one outside of Africa, and shortly after, all the African ones were hunted. So they're sharing about animals that we don't even know existed because they're extinct now. But these are the kind of things that are just so interesting, and we try to put in images and just make it very visually stimulating as well, and helpful for the keiki. So some of the other titles in this, we have Namanu, we have a whole collection of every different kind of bird they wrote about, canaries and peacocks and lovebirds, and also about insects and things that eat insects. There are a lot of articles about Europe just because of our political relations and connections and ali'i traveling there. So we did a whole book on that, and then another book on Ka'apuni Honua, because we did have a lot of our Kūpuna that were just traveling everywhere, and they were writing back about every single place they went to and all of their travels and exciting times. And then we did one more book on common and uncommon animals, and last book on farming. There are a lot of articles on farming and people sharing about different ways to farm and saying that we should farm, we should not stop farming, and it's very understandable, right? With all the land changes after the mahele, and then people kind of going back to their kuleana land and working and trying to grow their farming up again. I think they were really seeing how Hawaii was changing into a import state at the time. So very, very interesting. And mahalo. So that is the bulk of what I do under Hiʻohia. For those of you who are available, you can take a screenshot here or write it down. Our website is www.hiʻohia.org. We have a place for the Department of Education schools to make a reservation so that I can go ahead and do the invoices and you can create a PO. For everyone else who just wants to purchase with a credit card or whatever your school or organization or ohana uses, you can go to our hiʻohia.square site. Now, something exciting is that we also are putting all the books up into iBooks, so they are available for digital download soon. We have 40 titles out, and currently we have 16 on iBooks. But because you came to this workshop, thank you for choosing me over all these amazing other speakers that are on the other panels. I saw the list and I was intimidated. But because you came here, you can go ahead and email me, hiʻohia.inc@gmail.com, and I will send you a free digital download of one of our books. So mahalo nui. Also, I'm on Instagram and I do a lot of my social media campaigns there. You can follow me at Traveler Happiness. And I'm just going to put this out there. For the first 5 people who message me on Instagram and write Clubhouse, I will send you an invite to Clubhouse. If you don't already have one for that platform, you have to have an iPhone. I'm sorry, Android users. But if you don't already have, if you're not on Clubhouse already, I will send you an invite because it's invite only. But there are a lot of Olelo Hawaii people that started some rooms and discussions there. Auntie Akela was just in there this morning, and it's so fun to get together with everyone and just Olelo Hawaii. And they're there early in the morning, late at night, like 11 o'clock at night, people were in the room speaking Hawaiian. It was amazing. I loved it. So the first 5 who messaged Clubhouse, I'll send you an invite. Other than that, mahalo. Question and answer, please.
Mahalo nui, Kaʻiulani. That is so awesome, that offering of the digital book. I'll check with Lori to see if there's any questions that we can follow up on.
I saw a question about the cost of the series.
Currently, the cost of the series is $120 for all 8 hardcover books. And there are 5 series. There's the Waianae series in English, but just so you know, we only have 10 sets of those left. We have almost completely sold out. So Hiko, Mahalo Hawaiian Electric Company, they bought books for every elementary school on the coast just last week, on the Waianae coast and Ko'olauloa coast. So if you're at one of those DOE elementary schools, you'll be receiving some books. Lucky, lucky. And also Child and Family Services put in a huge order, and they gave books to many, many kids on the Waianae coast this Christmas. So they bought almost all of our Waianae books. So we have the Waianae in English, 10 left, Waianae in Hawaiian, and then the Ko'olauloa in English. So those are 8 books, and Ko'olauloa in Hawaiian. And then we have the New Pepa series. And so they're all 8 books, and they're all $120 for all 8 of them.
Kaʻiulani, people are asking if you might share your last slide with your contact information.
Yeah, screenshot it, guys. Sorry, it's a lot to write. Take a picture with your phone.
So we have about 12 minutes, and I just had a question. I love that you did the international travels part. And just what was that experience like reading from the Olelo? Because I know like a lot of the research a lot is in English of their international travels, so I was just wondering about that. And then how UH also did an international travels for their Native Hawaiian student services. So it seems like there's a lot of interest around that.
There are so many articles about their travels, and some of it was travels, and actually some of it was kind of history. Like they were just really intrigued by Greek mythology, and they printed a lot of that, and the history of different wars and battles. I mean, the Hawaiians were such intelligent people. They love to learn everything. And so because of that, that's why we had over 100 Hawaiian language newspapers at one point. I mean, I can't believe we only have one newspaper in Hawaii today, and there are over 100 at one point. I mean, but I feel like it's the same thing. We were almost 100%. We had almost 100% literacy rate, right, here in Hawaii, like one of the highest in the world. And we're still trying to get back to that, and I hope in the same way we can. But some of the more interesting, I really enjoyed when the Hawaiian writer would kind of put their perspective on some things. So they would say, you know, this war is happening in New Zealand between the Maori, our Maori cousins, and they would say our Maori cousins, you know, and the British, you know, and we should support them. And why are the British even there trying to take over? And they should just leave. And it's really funny to hear their voice and to hear their manaʻo and how they would stand up on different issues and kind of get involved in international politics as well. I had some other stories coming out of Africa. So there's one that came out of Africa, and we put it in the book that was talking about slavery. And it talked about how many men, women, and children were put on the slave ship, and somebody had even drawn an image of what it looked like with all the men, women, and children laying down in certain areas. The slavery, I mean, there are a lot of really strong issues. In some of the stories, they also talked about China foot binding and at the time also how they didn't want to have girl children. They only have boy children. So a lot of these real controversial things kind of happening, and it was all talked about in the Hawaiian language newspaper. Like, just really amazing hearing all the different topics that they were talking about during that short period of time.
Yeah, super amazing. Thank you for sharing. Are there any other questions or comments?
Mahalo nui. It was awesome presentation. Hi, Ka'i.
Mahalo for coming. Don't forget to email me. I want to send you all a free book.
I guess just one last thought. I think it's amazing that you got into a DOE Kūpuna program. So what an awesome resource. And that you're continuing to have contact with DOE. So good job for that.
Yeah, they've been really big supporters. I mean, I think they really appreciate when there are more resources. I know when I was working in the DOE, sometimes it's hard, especially for Hawaiian immersion when there are cluster grades. So there have been times when I've taught 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade together. And after you read the book in 2nd grade, and then you read it in 3rd grade, and you read it in 4th grade, there aren't enough resources coming out. And so I really want to encourage anybody, if you have ideas and if you desire to kind of get your mo'olelo out, to contact us, and we can help, you to go through the process. We've done it. Other people, you don't need to have me come into your moku. I can help you direct this project in your own moku as well. I would be happy if everyone took their own moku and they all did it for their moku. That would be great. I don't have any problems with people taking this system that we've created and replicating it. So yeah, I share that with all of you. You can have it. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. I really enjoyed it, and every moku is different. And the Waianai post, one of the fun issues we had are all the Hawaiian men, I'm not going to say all, many of the Hawaiian men have tattoos all over their body. So we used a lot of our makeup artistry actually to cover up the 96792s, as much as we could. and just there was all kinds of tattoos all over the place, and so that was a big. They were okay taking off their clothes and putting on their malo, but the tattoos needed to be covered. And then when we went to Ko'olauloa district, they're a lot more reserved. The Latter-day Saint community out there is very, very strong. So when we said you have to take off all your clothes and put on a malo, everyone was like, no ways. It was really different. We had to convince and force them and say, please, can you put on this traditional wear for us? So yeah, so it was really interesting and fun. Every district has their own kind of different little things going on that we had to work around and adjust to. And I'm excited to do it in more districts for sure.
Awesome. I'll just turn over to Lori one last time to see if there's any last questions or comments.
No, but lots of mahalos, Kaʻiulani, for just an awesome, inspirational story. And hopefully, as a result, we'll have more budding authors and artists out there to continue to share the mo'olelo.
One part I forgot to share that I just remembered is that a portion of our sales does go to scholarships for all of our models and the people who participated. So anyone who is involved in the project, we'll start opening up our Ko'olauloa scholarship soon. So if you were involved, then you get to apply for a scholarship. So yeah, that's one of the give backs to the community for us. So mahalo and thank you everyone who said mahalo in the chat box. I'm reading it now and I'm grateful that you're here. Everybody aloha, enjoy the rest of the sessions. They look amazing. Have fun.
Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha. Hui hou.